Hi, welcome to the F1 Time Portal, a Formula One history podcast started by two Formula One superfans. I'm your superfan, Rosa.
And I'm your super host fan, Luigi. And today we're taking you back to the rest of the 1959 season. So let's go. Now, one thing before we get started, Rosa, is it only took me till now to realise that you were changing the word. Like, I was changing one of my words, which was the thing about what sort of host I was. Yes. And normally it's trying to be superior to you in some way if I can. but you're the one. I only just realised now that you're saying by two Formula One. You've said super fans, tragic fans, nerds.
Yes.
And I was like, only now do I realise you were changing it. So it took me this long.
We don't discuss every part of our notes. I thought you'd pick that up.
No, I did not pick it up, which is pretty bad. But anyway, I picked it up now, better late than never. I picked it up before the 60s, right?
Yes, well, I've got some really good words coming in for the 60s. So, watch out. It's going to get interesting.
And because we've just recorded the last intro for the 1950s, I've missed out on making like Elvis references, something like that, you know. So I'm really disappointed that I've pieced this all together so late. But we're going to add a lot more culture to the future years, like one of the top songs of 1961, and there'll be a Beatles.
Well, I was going to say you're going to go into your Beatles era. You love the Beatles.
Yeah, I do love the Beatles, especially the second half of their career. So yeah.
Okay, well, we're up to race 4 for this season. So we've still got, 5 races to talk about? So, race 4 is the British Grand Prix. It's July the 18th. We have 75 laps, 24 drivers, and a 4x3x4 grid formation. So the biggest disappointment for this race is the fact that Ferrari couldn't make it at all. So they've been caught up in a labour strike in Italy and were unable to travel to England. I struggled to find out any more apart from like trawling through labour strike information for Italy. I couldn't find whether it was like just for the Ferrari factory or a transport workers strike. But anyway, nonetheless, none of them could travel to England. Brooks, however, was given a release and he was provided with a van wall to race in for this weekend.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, first of all, that van wall's like a 1-year-old car, remember? So this is July 1959, so maybe more than a 1-year-old car. So I don't know why he chose such an old car to drive in, because he's sort of like a bit of a contender in this championship. But I also had to hold back from making comments about labour strikes in Italy. So I was very proud of myself because it would have been maybe inappropriate, and I don't know if we could have recovered from that.
No, and let's not upset like the Tifosi out there, Luigi. Like they are going to be like a big proportion of our listenership, I think. If it's
because they're learning all about the Ferrari DNA in this podcast, aren't they?
Yeah, so, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so and Moss
is driving his dad's BRM car, his BRP,
his
British
BRP.
Racing.
His Yeoman,
partnerships. I can't remember what it was called.
British. Well, no, I think they're Yeoman Racing now, but yes, British Racing. So Thursday and Friday practice was wet and miserable. Surprise, surprise for Silverstone. However, it cleared up by the afternoon on Friday, and with the track now dry, Brabham set the fastest lap with 1 minute 58 seconds, equalled by Salvadori in the Aston Martin, with Shell taking the last spot on the front row.
Yeah, well, the British teams have definitely shown up well for their Grand Prix, their home Grand Prix, but there was no Ferrari to unsettle them.
I mean, literally, there's only British teams out there, Luigi.
Yeah. And so that's really Aston Martin's done a good job of, they've come back at just the right time, and Van Wall, they're gone, except for that one car that they're in. So they've missed their opportunity. And where's Gordini and all the other French little teams? They could have really flourished with this absence of the Ferrari team. But no, they're not there. They're not there to take advantage of it. So, yeah.
Well, Van Wall, although they're here, they qualified 17th. So, not good. And
I wouldn't say Van Wall's here. It's more that Brooks borrowed that Van Wall and he qualified 17th rather than the team, I reckon. So, yeah. Yeah,
good point. But still, very slow, 17th.
Yeah.
And Moss qualified 7th and McLaren 8th.
Yeah.
So at the race start, Brabham just ran away from the field and on lap 1 already had a lead of 2.5 seconds, growing to 10 seconds by lap 5. Second place was not nearly so clear-cut, though, with Shell, Bonnier, Gregory, Moss, Trintignant and McLaren all scrapping for position to lap 8. Coming up to back markers, Moss and Shell took advantage and broke away from the group.
It's always interesting to see when drivers are able to break away from their challenger when they're passing back markers. It's like they're better able to deal with the variability of a fast car passing a slow car while competing with an existing car that's on their level. And there's always some drivers that really stand higher in that regard than others. And I'm thinking of a particular driver. Are you thinking of that same driver, Rosa?
I think I am. Yes, I think I am.
Surname starts with S.
Yes. Well, actually, there could be two. I'm thinking of Senna, but I'm pretty sure Schumacher was pretty good with back markers as well.
Yeah, I was thinking of Senna. I think Senna's more famous for it than Schumacher, though. But Schumacher tended to be in the lead a lot more, so he didn't have to. He didn't have another driver next to him while in the lead.
No, he was
Senna,
on his
who
own.
Seemed to have a bit more. Yeah, he was on his own a bit more. Senna sort of had people around him a bit more.
Yes.
So yeah.
Well, you can't go wrong if you just keep thinking of Senna for everything.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, Brabham was still increasing his lead, and by lap 12, it was out to 15 seconds. Trintignant caught up to Shell and was now fighting for third, putting on a great display of close racing. I mean, that's pretty good. He's the last French driver we've got on the grid. So, he's flying the flag, yes. So further down the grid, Brooks had retired with ignition and brake problems for his van wall. Oh, yeah, not a good,
bit of a waste.
Not a good car to keep challenging for the championship, was it? He would have been better off trying to get a Ferrari. No, there's none in England. After 25 laps, the gap between Brabham and Moss was levelling out at around 15 seconds, while McLaren had made a move past Trintignant and Shell to grab third place. Moss was now creeping up on Brabham and by lap 50 had taken the lead down to 10 seconds, but a stop by Moss for tyres stretched the gap to 51 seconds, with McLaren in third, 15 seconds further behind. Moss continued to chase Brabham and reduced the gap to 20 seconds, but then he had to pit for fuel, during which McLaren flashed past him.
One thing I want to know what's going on here. Does Brabham have a magic car that doesn't seem to require new tyres or fuel? I'm sure he's doing these things, but it's not mentioned in the book, so therefore you're not mentioning it. But he must have done that, and it was just a matter of course, perhaps. But it's funny to hear that Brabham's just in the lead the whole time, and these other guys can't catch him because they keep having to stop for fuel and tyres.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure he had to. But, it's just not worth mentioning. So it took only a lap for Moss to replace McLaren, but McLaren stayed right on Moss's tail for the rest of the race.
So much so close and so much action. The crowd would be going crazy here because Moss was driving a British car, British driver. All the cars were British. And these two cars were providing the most action, having qualified 7th and 8th, and here they are fighting for 2nd and 3rd, putting on a real battle. Would have been really great to see that as a home crowd thing. Yeah. Which again explains why Britain supports F1 so much.
Yes, yeah. So on the last lap, McLaren pulled alongside Moss, but Moss was able to hold him off just enough to cross the line ahead of him in second. With everyone so caught up in the excitement for second, they forgot that Brabham had won and had led the entire race. So that's interesting, isn't it? He was so far ahead, everyone forgot he actually passed the finish line first.
Yeah. So interestingly, on the last lap of this race, McLaren became the youngest driver to set a fastest lap in Formula One. He was aged 21 years and 322 days. And it was to be another 44 years before that record would be taken from him. And it was none other than a young Fernando Alonso who achieved that at the 2003 Canadian Grand Prix. And he was only a day younger at 21 years and 321 days. So, gee, that record stood.
It did. And then to only get broken by one day, like after 44 years, that's just amazing.
Yeah, and a lot of records that Fernando set all got broken by other people after that, but at least that record was a real standing one.
So how are we looking in the championship standings?
So we've got Brabham leading on 27 points in his Cooper Climax. Tony Brooks second on 14. He's in the Ferrari and in the failed Vanwall attempt in this race. Phil Hill was third on 9 points, and then you've got Sterling Moss and Bruce McLaren both on 8.5 points each in fourth and fifth. And in the Constructors, you've got Cooper Climax leading with 26 points, followed by Ferrari on 16, BRM 14, and Lotus Climax with 3.
Okay, and we've got Sterling Moss and Bruce McLaren on half points there, but that's because they shared fastest lap for this race. So remember, there's no car sharing points anymore, but they shared the fastest lap. Okay, on to race 5. We have the German Grand Prix. It's August the 2nd. We have 60 laps, 15 drivers, and a 4x3x4 grid formation. Ferrari are back for this race, and we're actually racing at the high-speed Avis track in Berlin instead of the Nürburgring. So this track is really very unusual and a very simplistic track because it was being run down both sides of a dual autobahn carriageway. So if you can just imagine 2 carriageways going side by side, one going one way, one going the other, and at one end there's a 180-degree hairpin, and at the other end there's a steep banking that connects the 2 roads. So this steep banking was actually regarded as very lethal by many of the drivers. And sadly, it proved to be just that in a sports car race that was held the day before this Grand Prix.
Yeah, before I talk about that sports car race, I was going to mention that the Nürburgring was also known as a very dangerous track. So we went from one very dangerous German track to an even more dangerous German track. And I've read a lot about this track. I'm not sure if it did anything more than one race. It could have just done one race. I can't remember exactly. But this track is an abandoned area now. Obviously, I think the autobahns might still be in use, but not the curved banking.
It is.
The angle on that curved banking is extreme, and it's something you can see overgrown with weeds and all that sort of stuff. But if you look it up, it's pretty phenomenal how extreme it was, and you can see why there was a lot of concern about the event and the drivers. But I'll talk about why it's so sad. Because unfortunately, our favourite driver, Jean Behra, lost control of his car in the pouring rain while doing 180 kilometres an hour. His Porsche began to fishtail with the car going higher and higher up the steep bank. Then it spun and flew off the top of the banking and landed heavily on its side on the banking while the race continued underneath. So Behra was flown from the car and was fatally injured when he hit one of the flagpoles, and where they had these flagpoles for all the nations competing on top of the embankment. So it's pretty devastating. Many injuries he received, and it's real sad that we lost a top driver that really should have won many races.
Yes.
And that's another fatality, unfortunately.
No, yeah. So he had 3 funeral services, one in Berlin, one in Paris, and one in Nice, being French. And he had well over 3,000 people at each of those paying their respects. Conspicuously absent, though, among those present in the racing community was Enzo Ferrari. Reportedly, and I say this because this is the reports that I've read, he did not send any remembrance to the funeral or any of the services either.
Yeah, I think he deserved better than that from Enzo. I know he didn't die in a Ferrari, but I wonder if Enzo ever regretted that later in his years.
Yeah, that is a pity.
So Behra's F1 career spanned 8 years, and as we have commented many times on this podcast, he was a very reliable, consistent and competitive driver. I wouldn't say he was a number 1, but he was a 1.5. No, he definitely wasn't a number 2. Yeah, he took the lead lots of times.
Yeah.
He drove for Gordini, Maserati, BRM and Ferrari, had 52 starts, 9 podiums, which is a pretty good ratio, and gained 51 1/7 points in his career. And he was a young 38 years of age when he passed away.
Yeah, that is sad. He had started a new F2 team. Like, who knows what he might have gone on to do as well, which is what we always say whenever something like this happens.
Yeah.
Anyway,
and let's not forget he employed a female to drive that F2 team.
exactly.
So he was real.
Yeah,
he was not a tradition. He was innovative. He was fresh.
Yep.
So it was really sad. Yeah.
It is sad. Yep. So back to this race. Uniquely in Formula One history, this race was to be run in 2 heats of 30 laps each, running approximately 1 hour each, mainly because of the possibility of tyre trouble on this track. So that is really interesting. Like, I don't know that, like, even the banking at Monza didn't cause the race to be, and there was tyres threading there all the time. That didn't cause the race to be run in 2 heats there. So, yeah, very interesting strategy for the organisers here. So drivers finishing in the first heat were allowed to start in the second heat, lining up on the grid in their finishing order from the first heat. And the final results would be determined by adding the times of completing both heats.
That's very interesting. I'm looking forward to this because it really lends itself to some unique strategies, because you could be like 30 seconds behind in the first heat and it means nothing. Oh, no, it does mean something because the times are added.
The times are added.
Start. Yeah,
yes,
yeah, okay, it is interesting.
Yeah.
And I just had an ominous thought just now, and I won't look it up because I don't want to have verified what I'm thinking.
Right.
But could this track have been a little bit shaped like the Indy 500?
No, it wasn't an oval.
Okay, good. Just checking.
It's not an oval. Like it's 2 sides of a freeway, if you can imagine, 2 straight roads really close together, and then like a loop at one end and a loop at the other.
Oh, okay, yep. So it's not a big oval like that. It's
not a big oval.
Yeah, like dramatic edges, essentially.
Yes. Yep. Yes.
Okay, got it.
Phew. Okay. I don't know what would have happened if you'd think it did look like the Indy.
We'd have to skip the race. We'd have to skip the rest of this one. And we'd have to rewrite the 1959 championship to remove this race from the records.
Okay, so first practice on Thursday was spent setting up the cars for the steep bank section. So lap times were purely incidental, and cars really just tried to set up their race, their proper for the race.
Their survival strategy.
Yeah, yes.
Too soon for jokes.
Yeah, no. Friday and Saturday sessions saw Brooks finish with the best time of 2 minutes 5.9 seconds, followed by Moss on 2 minutes 6.8, then Gurney in the Ferrari, and Brabham rounding out the front row on 2 minutes 7.4 seconds.
It must have been so hard for these guys to push on a track they all thought was so dangerous and was new to them, especially after what had happened to their friend and teammate Berra before. And let's also not forget, judging by the description you've made of this track, I can only imagine this truck must have been at full throttle, 80%, 90% minimum.
Yep.
Yeah,
yep.
So that's pretty brave. So when you say 2 minutes and 5 and 2 minutes and 7, that's 2 minutes and 1 of flat throttle. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, it was an 8.3 kilometre circuit. So...
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but adding to that feeling of pushing hard on a track, they also had a minute's silence in honour of Berra's memory. So before the race was due to start. So, it was a very heavy and, I guess, emotional environment to start a race in as well. And yet another example of not stopping a race, I guess. So on race day, both Moss and Brooks had a great start and were disputing the lead. At the end of lap 1, the order was Brooks, Gregory, Moss, Brabham, Bonnier, Gurney and Phillip Hill. Moss's race was over by lap 2 with transmission troubles, and Allison in the Ferrari joined him with clutch issues.
Yeah, Moss gremlins.
Yeah.
Already. Oh. And as a quick correction, I wouldn't say it's a correction, but I've very rarely heard Hill being called Phillip Hill. He was known as Phil Hill.
Phil Hill.
You know.
Oh, that's even harder to say.
I don't know the family. I don't know if maybe his mother called him Philip when he was in trouble, but he's known as Phil Hill normally.
Well, okay, sorry, Phil Hill. That is even harder to say.
It is a bit, yeah.
Okay, so on lap 4, Brooks was in the lead with Gurney, Brabham and Hill following close behind. This group continues like this until half distance when Brabham was grinding to a halt with transmission trouble and Phil had eased. I don't know why though. Like it just says he eased back. So I don't know whether his car was in trouble or there was team orders. I don't know. But the lead was now being contested by the 2 Ferrari teammates, Brooks and Gurney, followed by Gregory in the Cooper Climax. On lap 24, Gregory's Climax engine blew up, leaving the Ferraris to coast in for a 1-2-3 win, with Brooks, Gurney and Phil Hill in 1, 2 and 3 and McLaren in 4th.
Wow, so what a quick... That seems to have gone real quick.
Yes.
And so if you didn't finish, you were out of Heat 2? Is that pretty much what happened?
Yep, that's it.
Wow, okay.
Couldn't start. Yeah. You couldn't line up in Heat 2 if you didn't finish the race.
Yeah.
So after a short break, Heat 2 was underway, with the 9 finishers of Heat 1 lining up in their finishing order on the grid. This time it was McLaren who shot into the lead at the start, but by the end of the lap he had dropped to 5th, with Hill, Bonnier, Brooks and Gurney all passing him. By lap 7, the Ferraris were in control, running 1, 2, 3, and McLaren, who was in 4th, ground to a halt with transmission trouble. Herman, driving a BRN, then had a spectacular crash when the brakes gave way and the car went straight on into hay bales and was destroyed, turning end over end. Fortunately, though, Herman had been thrown out of the car and escaped serious injury.
That had to have been very lucky, and one of the few times that being thrown from the car was a good thing, sort of, and it must have looked horrific, and it must have been such a relief that the guy was fine.
Yeah, yep. So at this point, the race turned into a high-speed procession with the Ferraris out front and only 7 cars circulating in total. The final result for Heat 2 was Brooks first, Phil Hill second and Gurney third.
And so that is the final result then, I guess?
Well, no, the final result, so the final classifications for the race was Brooks, Gurney and Phil Hill, yeah.
Oh, interesting, okay. So what a weekend for Ferrari then, 1, 2, 3 for both heats. And this would have not helped Genzo's Ferrari plans to stick with the front engine Ferrari. I mean, I could see him saying, like, there may have been some technical people in the Ferrari team saying, you know, we've got to go to back engine. We've got to go back engine. Yeah. He's like saying those garagistas, look at us, 1, 2, 3. You know,
1, 2, 3
I can
in
see
2
him
races.
using this race alone probably cost Ferrari any chance of being competitive in 1960, pretty much.
Yeah,
because it would have galvanised him to not develop a car that was rear-engined. Absolutely galvanised it, because it's like mid-year, right? A little bit after, so
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so how are we doing in the constructors? Constructors will be interesting.
Yeah, so what was interesting was with Brooks winning that race and not driving a 1-year-old Van Wall anymore, he now jumps up into second place, or he was in second place, but he's closing up. So Brabham's on the lead with 27 points. Brooks is second with 23 points, so only 4 behind now. Phil Hill third with 13, Bonnier fourth with 10, and Trintignant fifth with 9. And in the constructors, you've got Cooper Climax leading with 29, followed by Ferrari 24, BRM 16 and Lotus Climax next with 3 points. So not getting many points, Lotus, but that's the future, not now.
Yeah. Okay, on to race 6, the Portuguese Grand Prix. It's August the 23rd, 62 laps, 16 drivers and a 3x2x3 grid formation. So this year's race was moved to the Monsanto circuit for the first time, which was a new one for a lot of the drivers except for Moss. He set the fastest lap with a time of 2 minutes, 2.9 seconds, nearly 2 seconds clear of Brabham in second, and Gregory nearly 2 seconds behind again in third.
So, first of all, Porto, you've missed your opportunity for sponsorship. Just letting you know. Secondly, the Lotus Transporter broke down crossing Spain. So Graham Hill and Ireland barely had time to qualify, which meant they basically started from the back of the grid, which is interesting to hear about those logistics having an impact on the grid.
What? So they couldn't just turn up on race day and start from the back of the grid, Luigi?
Like BRM.
Had the FIA sort of tightened up on the rules a bit, and you had to actually qualify for the race.
Yeah, well, it says they barely had time to qualify, so I don't know what that means. I have to check the grid to see.
I think
if I can
see.
Do they have a time?
Yeah, they had to set a time. Yeah, they had to set a time. So I think they were barely able to finish the required number of laps to set a time.
Yeah, I'm just having a quick look now. Give me a second. The Portuguese Grand Prix. Oh, they do set a time.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do. But, I mean, to give you an example, Moss got pole in 2 minutes 2, if I'm not giving something away. No. And Hill's 2 minutes 15. Yeah. And Ireland is 2 minutes 18. So it gives you an idea. Yeah. They're not normally 12 seconds a lap slower.
No, I wouldn't have thought so.
Yeah.
So race day was warm, so the start was delayed to 5 p.m. Both Brabham and Gregory beat Moss off the line, but within half a lap, Moss was back in front. The order was now Moss, Brabham, McLaren, Gregory, Gurney, Hill and Trintignant. On lap 2, Hill spun off and found himself behind his namesake Graham Hill in the Lotus. However, the Lotus of Graham Hill then spun, hit the bank, then bounced back onto the track in front of the Ferrari of Phil Hill. Both cars were extensively damaged in the crash, but the drivers were uninjured.
Well, thank luckiness for that. And is that a safety bank? Is that a safety? It must have been a safety bank, which is why no one got hurt.
I don't even know what a bank is. Like, what's a bank?
Isn't the only bank like I can think of is something.
Must have been like the only bank I can think of is like a river bank. But anyway, yes.
Oh yeah, that's not really a sticking up thing, is it? It's like a little angle.
Yes,
that's really dangerous. There's like a little platform to fly in the air.
Exactly. And I had to talk about Phil Hill and Graham Hill in the same paragraph.
Yeah, you tried to say Hill thinking you got away with it. Then Graham Hill's next in your sentence and you're going, Graham, oh no.
Damn it. Okay, so at quarter distance, the race was turning into a procession with Moss in a class of his own, 20 seconds ahead of Brabham in second and Gregory and McLaren third and fourth. By lap 24, Moss had lapped quite a few of the back markers and Brabham was also about to start lapping. But as he came up to the spot where the hills collided, he misjudged the corner. He crashed into the straw bales and then the car careened into a telegraph pole. Brabham was thrown from the car onto the track into the path of Gregory's car, who narrowly missed running him over.
Wow. Well, now I know why Gregory's had a couple of mentions this season, and this is why he's a star for not running over Brabham. That's first thing.
Yes.
And secondly, a telegraph pole was just by the side of the track. I mean, I wonder if they had any safety features around it at all, and I really doubt it. And they probably thought that's like a safety wall. It's like a little barrier.
Yes.
And I can't really decide whether being thrown from the car is a good safety strategy or not, because being thrown onto the track, that's pretty scary, you know?
It is, yes. Yeah. I'm thinking it's not a good strategy on balance, but you're right. It has come on. It does do some good things some of the time.
Yeah.
So Moss ended up lapping the entire field, winning the race with Gregory second and Gurney third due to a late withdrawal from the race by McLaren with transmission troubles.
Yeah, so transmissions and gearboxes seem to be the real problem this year, and we've had so many issues. Yeah. And Moss finally wins a race that, I mean, I don't know if this is his first race win of the year, but gee, he's finally nailed one. You know what I mean?
Yes,
it's like he's been in the lead of so many races this year.
Yes, and he had no bad luck coming to get him this race. Yeah. So what are we looking
the
like?
Drivers' Championship, so Brabham's still leading on 27 and Brooks is second on 23, so I think there's no change from the last race. But Moss is suddenly in contention, a little bit from distance, but there's 2 races to go. He's on 17.5 points, so he's only 9.5 points behind Brabham, so things need to go his way a little bit, but he can still win this one. Phil Hill is 4th with 13 points and Trinchin in 5th on 12 points. And in the constructors, you've got Cooper on 34 points. They scored 37, but 34 is their maximum. Ferrari 28, BRM 18, and Lotus on 3. So Ferrari are only 6 points behind the Coopers for the championship as well. And don't forget, Ferrari are yet to win a championship, a constructors' championship yet.
So just on your question about Moss, he retired at Monaco, retired at Netherlands, disqualified in France, came second at the British, retired in Germany, finished first here at Portugal. So,
this was his first win.
First win. Well, it's actually his first finish.
Yeah.
Well, second finish. He finished second at the British Grand Prix.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, thanks for that.
So he's keeping himself in it. Okay, race 7 is the Italian Grand Prix, September the 13th, 72 laps, 21 drivers and a 3x2x3 grid formation. So the main concern here was tyre wear due to the bumpy circuit and the high average speeds of around 200 kilometres per hour. Moss set the pace and qualified with 1 minute 39.7 seconds. Brooks second with 1 minute 39.8 and Brabham third with 1 minute 40.2. At race start, Brooks accelerated off the line but soon drifted to a halt with a broken piston.
Not ideal for Ferrari at their home race and not ideal for his championship challenge. Can we sort of say that now that are there many other Italian teams? Can we call this Ferrari's home race?
It's only Ferrari left, so it's their home race.
Is this the first time? I'm just trying to think. We haven't had Alfa Romeo for a while. We haven't had Maserati. Maserati's been out for a little bit now.
They have, yeah. So, it's been a while.
This is the home track for Ferrari, officially.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. We've talked about this before.
I think we have mentioned it, where all the fans, all the Italian fans, then all became Ferrari fans, and that's how the Tifosi was born. I think we've mentioned that before.
Correct. So, and I have some news about Ferrari as well. Not 100% related, but I've looked up Ugolini's first name.
Oh yes.
It's not Luigi as I was hoping it to be. Oh. It was Nello. Nello.
Okay.
That seems cool to be a cool name, actually. A bit different.
It is a cool name.
First name, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Oh, well, too bad you don't have another hero called Luigi to look up to.
Yeah, I don't know if I wanted him as my hero because he's like the loser protester guy.
Yes. Moss and Hill swapped leading the race for the next 4 laps, but from then on, Moss was content to stay in second and preserve his tyres as much as possible.
Well, it looks like the Coopers are trying to finish the race without a tyre stop, knowing that Ferrari would have to, as they were harder on their tyres, much like F1 strategies of today. Much like Ferrari of today. With
That's
their tyre
true.
consumption of 2024, 2023.
Yes. So race order by lap 11 is Hill, Moss, Gurney, Allison, Brabham and McLaren. On lap 23, McLaren's engine blew, ending his race. On lap 33, it all happened. Hill was called into the pits for a tyre change with his teammates following over the next 5 laps.
Why would they do that? Surely they're not falling for that trick again. I mean, even didn't Moss do this trick on them last year as well? Where he even did a big show and dance about our tyres will never last the race.
Yes.
All that sort of thing.
Yes.
So Ferrari have fallen for the old Moss, even though it's not necessarily Moss, but everyone learnt from the Moss trick of last year.
Except Ferrari. So, this gave Moss the lead with Brabham in third after Hill rejoined in second place. But, it was about now that Ferrari realised they had made a huge mistake with their strategy because Moss and Brabham could now ease off, saving their tyres, but also hold track position all the way to the end of the race. Yeah, it's because they pitted all of their drivers at the same time.
They did not think about covering off or anything.
No.
I wonder if this is coming down to the fact that it's well known in F1 in recent times. If you join Ferrari, you should try to speak Italian or learn Italian.
Yes.
I wonder how many of the Ferrari team don't even speak English.
Yeah.
So when the English drivers were doing their "I wonder if we will last" routine, they were doing it in English. All the Italians saw was some arm waving by the British drivers and teams and didn't think anything of it because they didn't even understand, which is why Ferrari blew this.
Yes, they did. Absolutely blew it. Okay, well, we've got one race left. So how's the world driver standings and constructor standing going?
Well, with Moss having won that race, the championship's starting to tighten up with one race. So Brabham leading with 31 points because he came third. Moss second with 25.5. Brooks is third with 23. Hill with 20 and Dan Gurney on 13. So I don't think... Can Brooks win it?
Yeah, I think he can. He can
win it if he wins it.
And fastest lap.
Yeah. So in terms of the constructors, that's getting a little bit tighter, but Cooper's still leading with 38 points. Ferrari second on 32, BRM 18 and Lotus on 3. So very exciting Drivers' Championship title decider coming up.
Yes. So we have the last race of the season, the United States Grand Prix. It's December the 12th, 42 laps, 19 drivers, and a 3x2x3 grid formation. So, yeah, first Formula One race to Formula One rules for the US of A. And, as we've said, it is the championship's wide open. And, it's 3 months later, Luigi.
Talk about a lot of newspapers sold, interviews, stress.
Yes.
And Moss in particular to think about it.
Yeah, exactly.
He's been thinking about all the races he's had retirements of this season.
Exactly.
And why he's only in second place in this championship.
I mean, that is pretty amazing given that. Yeah, that is amazing. So
when we think about 2021, which is probably one of the greatest seasons in F1 history, like up there in the top 10 of all time, and you had the two title protagonists on equal points, there was, I think, a 2-week gap between the last race and then that race, which is the final race of the season, and that 2 weeks was jammed.
Yes.
With media, and stories, interviews, analysis. What was 3 months like? you know? Yeah.
So... After all of that time, though, Moss did set the fastest lap for pole position with 3 minutes dead. Brabham put his car in second with 3 minutes and 3 seconds, and the American Shell third.
The interesting thing about him being third, and this isn't going to give much away, but at the end of this episode, we talk about our thoughts on 1950s. This deserves a mention. But it's got so much recency bias because it's the last race of 59. It's an amazing story, though. So there was controversy about Shell's qualifying because qualifying ended with Moss, Brabham and Brooks on the front row. But overnight, Shell was given third position next to Moss and Brabham with a time of 3 minutes 5.2. And that apparently had come at the tail end of the session and had gone unnoticed by almost everyone because his best time previously had been 3 minutes 11.2, which is 6 seconds slower and only good enough for 11th. So protests came from nearly every other team, the loudest from Ferrari, whose driver Brooks was displaced on the front row. Remember, he was third in the championship, trying to win the championship. And Ferrari's protests were largely ignored and Shell started from third place. So Ugolini wasn't there they probably asked Ugolini to help out. They probably asked him for some advice on how to do this.
Yes.
And they probably heard what Ugolini said and then did the opposite of what Ugolini suggested, knowing that can only give them a win.
Yes.
So the thing that's controversial is what had really happened with Shell did not come out until after the race. So I have a lot of question marks about this comment.
Yes.
At this track, there was a sharp right turn that apparently led nowhere. Shell found that he could take a shortcut that secretly cut across and came back onto the course during a lull in the traffic, and he cut 6 seconds off his time.
Oh, my God.
So he basically took a shortcut.
He took a shortcut.
And he revealed it after the race.
Wow. Okay. I think that I get strategy, and I even get, foxing a little bit to mislead other teams about your strategy. But this looks like blatant cheating, and it looks like just blatant trying to get a home driver on the front row.
Yeah, big time. And I can't believe he got away with it. I can't believe he got away with it, and it just seems unbelievable.
We'll see what happens.
Well, we can tell now because we're not going to talk about it, are we?
Well, I don't think we should give it too much time, but what happens to him?
Well, it didn't help him in the race. So sure, he qualified on the front row, cheating. He was 8th after the first lap, so he qualified 3rd. It was 8th already and retired on lap 6. So really, it was all for nothing. But still, it makes me question Shell pretty heavily.
Yes,
and I'm sure the other drivers would have thought not very highly of this.
No. Well, it looks like the Formula One karma gods took care of it, which is good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so back to the race. We're on race day now. So Brabham led the field as the flag fell, but Moss soon passed him and opened up a useful lead. Brooks was rammed by his teammate Von Trips and lost valuable seconds pitting to inspect the damage. On lap 5, the Moss gremlin struck again when he coasted to a halt with a broken transmission.
Wow. So right now, Brooks and Moss are out of running for the title, which really only leaves one outcome, I guess.
Yeah. So, Brabham's out in front with his teammate McLaren shadowing him in second, with the pair way ahead of Allison in the Ferrari. Meanwhile, Phil Hill had retired with clutch trouble on lap 9. At half distance, Allison's clutch began to play up, allowing Trintignant to pass him on lap 24 as Allison retired. Only 7 cars remained in the race, out of which 4 were on the same lap. Trintignant began to close.
I just want to cut in for a second there. I've just thought of a great idea. If I was in Formula One back in these days, I would bring back with me a really strong transmission and gearbox system.
Yes.
Go back in time and go to any one of these Formula One teams and just open up with this amazing speech and say, imagine a world with no gearbox or transmission retirements. I have that here now. And they would give me all the money I wanted because they would pretty much win the world championship just by having no clutch or transmission issues.
Yes, I know. Yeah. It's been a pattern of this season for sure. So, Trintignant began to close the gap to Brabham and Moss, and at the end of the final lap, less than 5 seconds separated the 3 cars. Then suddenly, with only a kilometre to go, Brabham ran out of fuel. So, no, he didn't have a magic car, Luigi. And Moss and Trintignant shot past him. McLaren himself only just making it over the line by 0.6 of a second. Meanwhile, Brabham was pushing his car over the line uphill about 500 yards.
Yeah, that's a lot of metres. Isn't a yard about a metre?
Yes. Yep.
Nearly, give or take a little bit.
Yep.
Uphill.
Yep.
And no one's allowed to help him because we know how strict the FIA are. If you get help, you're out.
That's right.
You can push your own car. It's safe and fine.
Yes.
On the track.
And I'm sure he's had to do this before too. I'm pretty sure he pushed his car over the line. I think it was at Monaco again, about 800 yards. Yeah. So he was passed by Brooks for 3rd while he was pushing his car, but was able to claim 4th place in the race and, of course, his first world championship.
And we will put images up of Brabham collapsed in his car in the social medias. And if we don't, then can you do it for us? And please make sure you give credit to the photographers. So I'm just giving myself leeway here in case we forget to do it.
Let's not put ourselves in prison or something.
Yeah. Why did you do it? So the final Drivers' Championship is Brabham winning with 31 points. He actually scored 34, but under the rules of the maximum number of races, he had 31. Brooks was 2nd with 27 and Moss 3rd with 25.5. Phil Hill 4th with 20 and Maurice Trintignant with 19. And in the Constructors, Cooper Climax wrap up. So the British teams have dominated the Constructors. They get 40 points. Ferrari 2nd with 32. BRM with 18, and Lotus Climax R5.
Well, I guess it is good that Ferrari didn't win the Constructors. Otherwise, they might have put themselves further behind in the 60s. But, what a win by Brabham. I mean, he had a pretty good season. So, yeah, I guess a great championship win for him. He finished in the top 6 out of the 8 races. So that's pretty consistent driving.
Yeah, and he won when he needed to, and he won when the opportunity was there. So good on him for that, and he was a good driver. So, yeah, for sure. Makes you think, though, Moss could have had this one very easily too, though, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's the beginning of his era, isn't it? Like, he is one of the greats of the sport, and he's always just...
You're talking about Brabham. You're talking about Brabham.
Brabham,
right?
yeah, Brabham. It's really... I mean, we're really coming to the end of Moss's era, I think. I feel we've been talking about Moss for quite some time. So, Brabham, he's always been described as a very quiet, unassuming and even shy person, but he just seems very determined. I mean, remember he just came from Australia and he inserted himself in the Cooper company and started building his own cars. So if it wasn't for him, I mean, he was really the catalyst to take Cooper to that next level of success, I feel.
He was, and let's not forget, before he started getting he only got his first Formula One win at the beginning of 59.
Yeah.
Prior to that, he was entering in some F2 races, some F1 races.
Yes.
So he must have come out of the blue.
Yeah.
And a shock to some of those established drivers. Like Moss wouldn't have seen this threat coming at all.
No.
And suddenly this guy beats him to the championship. There's a joke that Moss was always focusing on Fangio to try to beat Fangio to win the championship. Well, here comes a new guy that's just trumped him straight away. And it just shows that Brabham really was a bit of a star and out of the blue and caught the others off guard by his tenacity, his grit, his determination and consistency.
But like we've said, Moss had a really unfortunate year. Like, he had 4 retirements and a disqualification. Like, that is huge. Yeah. In a season of 8 races, like, reliability was just,
He still came second.
And he still came second, exactly. Yeah. So we finished the 50s. Well, I'm just going to do a little wrap-up of what the 50s brought us. It brought us Alfa Romeo with 2 world championships or driver championships, and they won the first 2. Ferrari won 4 world driver championships, Mercedes 2, Maserati 1, Cooper 1, and Cooper also had a World Constructors' Championship, and Van Wall with the first Constructors' Championship. So, I really enjoyed looking into this era. I think what I learnt the most about the 50s was that it was a very dangerous era for race car drivers, with safety almost an afterthought, and drivers needing incredible strength and courage to drive these cars to their limits and beyond their limits.
Yeah. And in a way, we have seen the pure skill of the drivers on display in this era, with the cars having very basic technology. So drivers like Ascari and Fangio really stood out as masters of their racecraft on very dangerous tracks. The many times we heard about wheel-to-wheel racing and getting to the corners 3 abreast, 4 abreast with no accidents, and for many, many laps in a row, that's just unbelievable driver skill. I don't even think we see that today.
No, I agree. And the other remarkable, I just shook my head every time I heard about it. The other remarkable characteristic of this era for me was the sportsmanship of the drivers, from Collins handing his car over to Fangio to help him win the race and his championship, through to Moss helping out Hawthorne to overturn his disqualification. And in both those instances, those 2 drivers put themselves out of contention for the championship. That's just incredible to me. And I don't know if we'll ever see that happen in future eras of F1.
Yeah, I agree. The lows were very low, though, with lives lost on and off the racetrack, including Ascari, Hawthorne, Collins, Musso, Berra, just to name a few. And it showed the genuine dangers that these drivers face that are just not present today.
So if you had to choose one highlight of this era, what would it be?
Well, you say one highlight. I literally struggled to just have only 3. So cut me some slack. And I only left Shell out from number 4 because we just talked about it. So Shell gets a special mention for cheating. But I think the first highlight for me is I think Ascari getting the 9 wins in a row was a really awesome feat. And ironic that only in 2023 was this record finally beaten. That's not really ironic, just that it took so long.
Yeah,
it's of course very hard. Yeah, it's very hard to compare records like this over different generations. And I hate to say it, but if you inflation adjust Ascari's 9 wins, which was like at that time, like 1.5 seasons in a row, you could argue, and I actually don't argue, I believe it was more impressive than Max winning the 10 in a row in 2023 because it was basically like winning 1.5 years of races straight. And over 2 different seasons, which is really hard because cars can change, teams change, drivers change, and there's a risk there. The second thing, and this is going to be a quick one because we've talked about it a lot already, was how incredibly unlucky Moss was. And the third thing that were a real highlight to me was Fangio being so aware of his surroundings during what were very dangerous times. And it even, just at the very beginning in Monaco in 1950, when he noticed that the crowd weren't looking at him, they were looking ahead. So he knew something was up and he lifted. And that enabled him to navigate past that big gaggle of damaged cars and to go on and win that race. And also another feat that he did, which I think is very special, he won the championship in 4 different marques. Now that's pretty special because I hate to say it, and I'm not trying to devalue Max Verstappen or Lewis Hamilton or Michael Schumacher when they won their 4 or 5 in a row with the same team, or 3 in a row with the same team. But it's easier when the team's on momentum, the regulations don't change, and you're continuing on with evolutions of super successful cars.
Yeah.
When you jump teams, it's a different animal each time.
Exactly.
And Fangio did that, and that's really special. And I don't think that record will ever be beaten. I don't think anyone will ever win championships in 4 different marques ever again. I can't see that.
Yeah, I agree. I did choose one, but I chose that amazing race by Fangio at the Nürburgring in 1957, where he broke the lap record like in 7 consecutive laps, and I think he broke the lap record 9 laps in total, and that was to clinch the world title. And that was from Musso, who still mathematically thought he could win it next. But that was just an amazing race. I got goosebumps reading about his recollection of that race as well. So yeah, that was just a really amazing race by Fangio for me.
Yeah, he did say that was one of his greatest drives, and that was right at the end of his career.
Yes,
but near the end. So he was really on form at the end.
Yep.
Yeah, so it was a dominant era for the Italian teams, but as we have said, the British teams and rear-engine cars are poised to rule the next decade. So how long will it take Enzo to realise and develop a rear-engine car, I wonder?
Yeah, very interesting question. I hope you've all enjoyed reliving the 1950s as much as we've enjoyed bringing it to you. So yeah, next week we start the 1960 era.
I can't wait. I love the 1960s. I love the cars. And I look forward to chatting with you guys about that then.
Okay. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye.
We have a Patreon.
Yay. We're a professional podcast now. So it means a lot to us if you are able to support the F1 Time Portal podcast.
For a small monthly fee, you not only get ad-free podcast content, you will also receive special episodes that are exclusively uploaded for our Patreon financial supporters.
We promise at least 2 additional exclusive episodes each month aligned to the decade we are up to in the show.
And you will also be able to make suggestions about any special episodes you may want us to research and present. We can't promise that we can do all of them, but we will consider them.
So, if that sounds like an entertainment bargain to you, go and sign up at patreon.com/F1 Time Portal today.
If you're enjoying our podcast, please tell your friends and non-F1 friends alike.
Yeah, and don't forget to rate us 5 stars or whatever highest is available on the podcast platform that you use.
We have a range of social media handles for you to connect with fellow listeners, so look up F1 Time Portal on all the usual platforms.
Or visit us at www.f1timeportal.com or email us at f1timeportal@gmail.com.
We would like to give credit to our primary reference materials, a series of books called Grand Prix by Mike Lang.
We also use many other written and digital references, which are in our show notes.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you.